In this video, I'm going to go over the process of making a Marvel Rivals Spider-Man Bagman cosplay. I'm trying to make it as close to the game as possible. In this, I'm not going to go over the full processes of everything, but I will try to give some tips and tricks of just how I've learned to make things. The first thing to do is find reference photos. So I looked through the internet, tried to find anything that I could of this character and get details, close-ups of the outfit. Now here's one issue that I already had and I didn't follow properly. I kind of got it reversed, which we'll get to. But basically you can see his shoulders here. I don't know how I mixed this up, but it looks like the hooded sweatshirt is cropped in the sleeves. That's not what I did. It's something I should have done, but sadly not the case. I kind of reversed it. I was initially making a shirt to go over the hooded sweatshirt, which is wrong in my opinion now. But anyways, I ended up not making it this exact. Maybe in the future I can modify it and do the full process. But at this moment, I just have a hooded sweatshirt that'll look like this. We can see it's got this big zipper. So that looks pretty difficult, right? Another feature is it looks like rolled sleeves with this green thing, and obviously this huge emblem. Clearly he has a bag over his head, and then there's this extra little bag here. There's additional straps. This is like a secondary strap, which we'll see in the photos probably. And then you can see on his hands for the web shooters. Also, we can see the pants. These are super poofy, a very specific blue. That's another rant that I got for men's clothes that I'll get to. Right here, this is a unique little feature. It's a little character of himself with I have another photo. It's a 4 in there. I think they're Avengers. I can't remember, but you can see that there's something unusual going on with the hooded sweatshirt as well. There's this little black strap in the back of it, and clearly there's something weird going on with this. He has a black shirt under it. And here's one thing that I didn't do is the cargo pants pockets. And we can see that the cuffs for the ankle cuffs or whatever, they can cinch. I think that's the right word, to tighten those. I did do that, pretty easy. So I just took as many photos or screenshots of the game that I could find online. I haven't played this. On the bag, we can see this green strap of sorts. Here we can see the web shooters a little bit closer. It's got a red cord of some sort or tube. I didn't make mine super specific to this, but you know, here you can kind of get a general idea of the design, how that might work. For me, the hair was an afterthought. I did take some photos with a wig that I had on hand, but I just barely tried to style it a little bit with a steamer. It's from a previous cosplay. Anyways, that's about it for the design. And then in my head, I'm looking for all the things that I need to get for this to make it as easy as possible, as quick as possible. Oh, this was a nice little reference to get more details. This is what I started with, is the little plushie. So as I'm going through the process of building the plushie, I just look for any fabrics that I have on hand so I don't have to spend money on it. I had some blue fleece fabric, which I ended up using. I had some black, that's kind of a t-shirt fabric. I used that as well. So the blue, the black, some white felt, and some brown felt is all I really needed. And I think I had some black felt for the eyes, which I actually did in the wrong direction. But yeah, it's a pretty simple process. You're going to have a human form of sorts. You know, you've got the 2 legs, 2 arms, and the head portion. That's going to be the blue. You cut out to a general shape. It doesn't have to be perfect. These little plushies are very basic looking in their shape. They're kind of like, I don't know how I could describe it, but very simple, easy to cut out. You just make 2 of them. And then in this case, with the black gloves and shoes, I just used the black fabric as well. Attach that first to the blue for both sides. So you're going to need 8 pieces of black fabric, 2 pieces of blue, the 1 piece of white with the 4. In the case of the white, cut out a circle, and then I used the sewing machine in a different thread mode, whatever you want to call it, to draw out the 4 in a pretty simple process. But depending on your sewing machine, you know, it'll work well or not. In my case, it was just kind of a good enough thing because I didn't want to spend a huge amount of time on this. Black gloves, shoes, the blue interior, the white I attached first with the 4. And then the head portion is the brown felt in a rectangle. Wanted it to kind of look like a bag of sorts. from there, start sewing these pieces together. First off, I'm going to attach all of the pieces to the blue portions, which are the body portions. So that'll be the black for the hands, the feet, and also the head portions with the brown. All of those are going to attach to each side of the blue. So you can have the front and the back, and all of them need the brown and the black portions as well. Attach them. I did actually mess this up somehow. I don't know how I did it, but on the back, I reversed some of the brown, which I fixed later on, but it wasn't a huge deal. Just you have to be very careful and mindful of orientation when you're sewing. You're going to face the final portions of the materials facing inward toward each other. You're going to sew on the exterior of all of that joined together and leaving a portion of it open so you can reverse the final sewn together object and then finish it off and close that once you've filled it with some type of material. So it's a pretty common way to do sewing in this case. I reversed it. I figured out that I did the back portion wrong. I cut that off and it was fine. And I left the top head portion open because I needed to attach some type of loop so that I could attach it to the bag. And I just got another piece of felt, rolled it up quite a few times, sewed that quite a few times so it was strong. And then I put it into the head and then I attached that and sewed it down. It doesn't look amazingly close, but it's kind of a good enough situation to make it work. And I stuffed it, obviously before that, so that it was plump little dude. So not perfect, but got the job done as quick as possible for that. And then I had a bunch of things that I had purchased in the past, loops, keychain things that I was able to make it look pretty decent there. The next thing was the biggest, most difficult, was the hooded sweatshirt. I went around to various stores looking for something that I could use. Obviously, when you buy new, it's pretty expensive. And I actually went to a Goodwill and found this hooded sweatshirt. First one that I went to, very nice quality, looked clean, looked like it was in good condition, was the perfect size for me, in the perfect color. So, I just really lucked out. And with the little additional roundup cost, it was $5 after tax. I think it was $4.80 or something, which was lower than what the tag said. But hey, awesome. So anyways, $5 for this hooded sweatshirt. I did wash it before doing anything with it. But even so, it looked clean at Goodwill. I assume they wash the stuff before they sell it. But anyways, I rewashed it just in case. And yeah, as good, honestly, as good as I could ever expect from that find to match what I was looking for. I did go to Michael's and purchased a bunch of things to build out the cosplay. The green fabric, which I think was $3 a yard, pretty cheap. It's just standard broadcloth for the fabric. And then I did look at their hooded sweatshirts, but in that case, they were $25, $26 for a red hooded sweatshirt. So compare $5 for the Goodwill one versus $26 for a new one that I would cut up and destroy. So yeah, definitely look around and try to find good deals and such. I'd think resale shops are the cosplayer's best friend in a lot of situations. Oh, I also bought some thread, red thread, green thread, so that I could match the green to the broadcloth that I bought and the red to the hooded sweatshirt. So that was good. The thread was probably one of the more expensive things, but with Michael's, always check their website for coupons, however you pronounce it, because they had a 20% off in store. So that was fine. Nice little bonus. I started trying to modify the hooded sweatshirt, cut the arms off after I put it on and measured and tried to get a general idea of how long I wanted the sleeves, considering that I would roll up the sleeves afterward. So I didn't really cut a huge amount off of the sleeves. Cut off the sleeves. I rolled over the sleeves. I cut little strips of the green fabric, and with the green fabric, obviously you need one for each arm. Actually, you're going to cut 4 strips, attach 2 of them together, reverse them, sew it again. Then you'll have a fully formed strip that you can attach to the sleeve and do it for the other one as well. Again, that's following the same exact process of a lot of sewing in my case. And then I roll over the sleeves of the hooded sweatshirt, sew those as well. And it looks fairly close to the final product, which is that. And then let me see if I have a example here. Yeah, so this is kind of what mine turned out to look like. Next up was the big zipper. So I was trying to figure out how to do this properly. Again, I initially planned on doing 2 things, and I did basically finish 2 things, but in the end I didn't do 2 things with the shirt and the hooded sweatshirt. So I needed 2 zippers, potentially. I went to a Walmart because Michael's had nothing even remotely close, because I wanted a metal zipper. And Walmart had a gold zipper in the long length, which was, I think, 22 inches. So that's a pretty long zipper. And it was honestly perfect, at least for my size. I'm a large, generally. So a men's large 22-inch zipper should be fine for what you're trying to do. And, you know, I would have preferred a silver because that's closer to his design. But sadly, the Walmart I went to only had the gold. I could have gone to a different Walmart or some other store, but I didn't. So I bought the gold zipper in the long length, and then I bought a silver zipper in the shorter length. The shorter length one was a 9-inch zipper, I believe. And I ended up attaching that short zipper to the t-shirt, but like I said, I scrapped that idea. If we look at his design again, the zipper goes the entire length, the sleeve and the collarbone. So you can see that, but like I said, there is a split here, even though it looks like it's the same, which is weird. It's just probably because of how they had to make it 3D for a game. It's just not logically created as a real thing. Because in my case, if I were to have done it true to how I felt it should be, without messing up, I would have 2 zippers. I would have one zipper for the long sleeve, interior sleeve, and then I have a shorter zipper for the hooded sweatshirt over it. And then this would have another tab for pulling. So yeah, that's how I would prefer to do it eventually if I modify it. Anyways, in this case, I put the hooded sweatshirt on just to get a feel for where I should cut the sleeve and kind of where it should land on the sleeve. And I took note of how I would position the zipper. I put the zipper on me just to get a general idea of if it was long enough. If it was too long, but it actually worked pretty dang well. And actually I did it on the wrong side initially. So I made a cut on the wrong sleeve. How I managed this, I don't know, because I put the bag on and I put it on properly, how it should fit and be placed on me. And clearly the zipper is on the opposite side of where the bag strap is. And then I cut the wrong sleeve. So how I didn't think, I don't know. But that's things that you go through as a human brain. Yeah. Anyways, I repaired that cut by taking a piece of the fabric from the sleeves that I cut off from the hooded sweatshirt. And I put that into the slit that I made, which wasn't huge. It was just like 1/2 inch at most. I put that in there. I sewed it up with the red thread that I had, and it's fine. It's not super noticeable. And in general, this cosplay the construction quality is up close, not amazing. So, I mean, it's just, it is what it is. I'm not super concerned about it. So I cut the other sleeve properly of where it should land. I cut all the way down to the collarbone area. I didn't cut into the hood portion because the zipper wasn't long enough. I mean, if I wanted to do true to life design, it would have gone the entire length, but the zipper wasn't long enough. So I just cut into the base of the hood. And I think that's fine. It looks good. Here, you can see it goes all the way up to the top of the hood. But I mean, that's a really, really long zipper. And what I did next is I rolled over each side of the hooded sweatshirt where I cut that line so that I get a nice clean edge. You don't want to use a lot of fabric here because it might make the sleeve too tight. So I try to use as little fabric as possible to roll it over, and then I sewed that down, and it's a clean edge, so that's great. With the gold zipper, it has black edges to it, which are a fabric, and I attached that with pins so that I got it as perfect as possible. Used a ton of pins in this case, so it's really on there. It's not going to shift that much when I sew it, and I just did the thing, I sewed it down. Now, the somewhat difficult part of this, metal zippers are a little dangerous to sew. If you try to cross the zipper itself. With your sewing machine, you could easily hit your needle to the metal of the zipper. So I did that, and I broke one of the needles. And it's kind of dangerous because the needle piece might fly. It was fine in this case, but potentially dangerous. So be careful with that. And that's basically on the back portion of the zipper, the end of the zipper. I didn't need to cut it or do anything in this case. Sew down each side of the zipper. The thing is, you need to be mindful of the tab portion of the zipper. It's not going to go under the head of the sewing machine. It's too big. So you're going to have to sew a fair amount of this one side and then move the zipper to a different area so that you can finish it off. It's just things you have to deal with making it work. Just be mindful of the position of the zipper tab or whatever it's called, because sometimes it can be turned into a gotcha if you don't have it positioned right. You just have to stop your line of sewing, finish it off, add another line, and then just overlap a little bit so it's structurally sound. So that was good. The zipper is fully functional. Very nice. I'm happy with how that turned out. Next up, looking at the lower portion of the hooded sweatshirt, it goes up a really decent amount. It looks like there's some sort of elastic, and then you have a V shape on the sides of the hooded sweatshirt. Clearly, it's different than what the default of a hooded sweatshirt is. It's got these flaps on the front and back, and then that elastic on the top with the V shape. So pretty easy when you think about it. I just measured and tried to get symmetrical for each side of where I would cut that V shape. Now I didn't do a full V. I did like a U. I did kind of a flat topped U shape as I cut out a portion of each side of the hooded sweatshirt. Considering that you're going to fold over the fabric at least once, don't cut too much, but cut a fair amount. But also consider you might want to use some of that fabric that you cut off. So just keep in mind like the size of things. Actually, I ended up not using that additional piece of fabric for that. I used the cuffs that I had cut off earlier, the stretchy part of the cuff, and I split those open, and I used the stretchy part to add that back into the bottom of the hooded sweatshirt, so that once I rolled over those edges that I cut, I added that stretchy part of the cuffs into the top portion that was just close enough that it fully covered the top portions. So now it's got that nice stretchy bottom part to it that matches more so with the design. So very good. Also, when you're cutting something like an angled piece, you're going to make a slit where the, say, bottom portion and top portion, you're going to roll those over, but you have to do additional little cut between the two so that they can both roll over decently well. That's what I did for that. And then I added that additional fabric from the cuffs. Pretty simple process. The quality that I did of these was not amazing. That's another thing I'd want to go back and improve upon on the back side to make it look nicer. But it's good enough type of thing. Here you can see the additional cuff material after I finished rolling that over. I'm honestly pretty happy with how that turned out. It's a lot of eyeing it and just trying to get a general look to it of how you might want it to feel and function. Yeah, so I mean, it doesn't look amazing, but it gets the job done. So I've got the V shape, and then I've got the additional material from the cuffs to give it a bit more stretch and a different texture compared to the main material of the hooded sweatshirt. Good enough. Next up is the portion that I messed up and I eventually scrapped. As I had said, with the design, I think he needs an interior shirt of the same red. It's a very thick shirt, or maybe a second sweatshirt, but that's not what I did, sadly. I bought a t-shirt that I was going to put over the hooded sweatshirt, and it looked stupid. So, rip to me not thinking properly. But initially, I made it like a crop top shirt, because that's where I would put the logo, the Empire State University logo. I cut off the sleeves. I actually added a zipper to this t-shirt. I cut off the bottom portion so it didn't cover the big pocket of the hooded sweatshirt. Yeah. And then I also put, it was a process, a lot of wasted time and effort in my case, dealing with that shirt. But there is a little bit of a benefit, which we'll get to. Next up, the big green Empire State University logo, green circle with red text. So trying to think how to do that properly. There's probably 10 billion ways to do it, but basically kind of a bright green. I use that green broadcloth. There is a bit more to their design than how I went. Clearly it's two different tones of green here, but I just had the one. So, and then for the green itself, I just made a big circle. In this case, I used a Lazy Susan that was the perfect size to get a perfect circle out of it. So yeah, I looked out there, but if you want to make a relatively decent circle, you can use a piece of string and 2 pencils or something just to go in the center, and then something to go around once you've tied properly linked string between the 2 objects. So that's one way to do it, basically a compass, but without all the extra stuff. Or you can use an actual metal compass to draw a circle. Cut that out to size. You need 2 of them in this case, because I'd use my standard way of doing sewing. 2 pieces, they're going to be wrong side out first. You're going to sew around the edge, leave an opening, reverse it, sew around the edge again, close the opening. Then you've got a circle of fabric. Now there are some considerations with this, considering it's going to be on you and you have to attach down the center portion. Otherwise it's going to pull away from the rest of the material sometimes. I do deal with that by sewing an additional inner circle in green to the main fabric. In that case, I found a roll of tape that was smaller, and then I used that as a guide. I created a guide of red fabric or whatever color fabric. It's just a piece of additional fabric to use as a guide for my sewing machine. And then I attached that additional piece of fabric temporarily with sewing needles to it. I basically created an additional guide circle to sew the inner portion, again, to make sure that this really large circle of fabric has inner support so it doesn't pull away from the other materials it's attached to. And the guide I attach with needles to the main circle just temporarily so I can sew around it and get a circle of green thread that's not all jagged and goofily sewn. Obviously you don't need a guide, but it just helps to make it look nicer. You could also do like an X pattern or something if you don't care about that. But yeah, I just sewed an additional circle on the center. You could do that as many times as you want just to make it structurally sound. Before adding all of this paint to the circle, I cut the circle out of the t-shirt and I left a large portion of the red from the t-shirt. I wrapped that over and I fully pinned the entire circle to the hooded sweatshirt. I put it on after I pinned it just to make sure it was positioned decently well on my chest, from the top to the bottom to the sides, so it wasn't uncentered. I don't know if I got it perfect, but it looks okay. So in that case, I sewed that up, and actually this large zipper on the one sleeve is perfect to help you do sewing of stuff like this. So I unzipped that, and I was able to sew down the circle to the hooded sweatshirt without much issue. So that's on there. In the future, I might add more sewing to this. I did an interior circle and an exterior circle again of just one loop each. So it's on there. But in the future, if I want to wash this a lot, I think I would go back and add more thread to the edges of the circle. So it's really, really cinched down to the hooded sweatshirt. And there's different types of sewing designs from the machine you can use to make it look better and really roll the edges down. Yeah, it depends on what you want to do, but generally over sewing or adding a lot of sewing to it can sometimes be good, sometimes be bad, depending on how you want it to look and such. But yeah, and consider when you wash things, it's going to go through a lot of process. When you dry things, it's going to go through a lot. So I think generally more sewing is better in those cases. And then I started looking to try to figure out the logo. This was probably the most difficult process. Thankfully, there was a similar design for the Empire State University logo as a t-shirt and actually a transparent PNG, which is awesome. And so I found this similar design in a PNG. I pulled it into Affinity Photo, which is similar to Photoshop. I made a circle object of the same size. In the editing program, I tried to make it as similar to the game's design compared to whatever this was from. I'm not totally sure. I think it might be like an official Marvel version of it as a t-shirt. But I modified this one with the same colors and such, which honestly doesn't matter. just to make it look as close as possible to the game. So I was basically removing some things that the game version doesn't have. It's more of a simple design for the game version, which is great because that made painting and stuff a little bit easier. Cleaning it up, making it work for my design with the cosplay. Things of note with this design, you're going to have the E and the R from New York as an inverse because they're inside of what will be red paint, but you need the E and R to be not red paint because my background is green. So everything that I want red, I make black in the image. And I have a laser printer, which funny enough stopped working halfway through the print, but I got it working the day later. Anyways, consider how you want to print it. In my case, I'm making a template. So first off, to take this finished digital version, we need to size it properly to our actual physical object on the shirt. In this case, I measured about 11.4 inches, 29 centimeters. And I needed my printout to be the same size. And if you consider letter paper is much smaller than that, I had to print it out in 4 pieces of letter paper, join those together with clear tape, and actually taped over the entire thing once it was aligned with clear tape. And then I started cutting out each dark or black area of that printout where the red paint would be going. So in that case, pretty simple. It's just a very time-consuming process to cut out all of that. So I have a cutting mat. I have an X-Acto knife type thing. I don't know what they're called craft knives or something. I'm not sure. And just to get as clean as possible cuts. I think if you have some type of machine to do this, that would be awesome. Cry-Cut or maybe some other similar device that can do this from a printout. That would be the way to go. Probably save you so much time. But in my case, I cut it out by hand. It's not perfect, so you're kind of multiplying the issues when you do things by hand. But it turned out okay in the end, in my opinion. If you are cutting this out by hand or not, you want to consider you want to join portions and keep them attached so things don't shift. In this case, the interior circle needs to have support so that it doesn't shift inside the larger circle. That means you have to leave pieces of it attached. So in this case, I want 4 pieces around the circle to stay attached between the 2 circles. Same thing with inside the structure. There's a circle in there. So you need to keep this attached inside all of the letters that have interior circles in them, like the R's, the O's, stuff like that. You want to keep some of that material in there so it keeps the circle. Now you can just consider it when you're painting if you don't want to do that, but I decided to try to keep little tabs. And I messed up a few times when I was cutting, but I used some tape to re-add them as possible, just so that I keep those pieces in there. But if you're using a machine to do it, obviously in your actual design, you need to keep those tabs in there. Otherwise it won't work right. So things to consider. So here I messed up this tab. So I added some tape. Here's the tab for this circle for the building, keeping that in position. Here I totally messed up the 8, but I remembered to not paint that portion later on. Here with the 6, I have a tab to keep the central circle in there. Again, on the bottom of the main connection between the smaller circles and larger circles or other shapes, just to keep it fully positioned so nothing shifts when I'm painting. And one of the more complex things and kind of free form that I had to do is with the E and the R of New York. So I just left those to deal with later. I didn't want to try to do anything complex with that. The leaves were honestly one of the easier portions to deal with, so that was great. Just anything like the R, where you have to have that little circle piece in there, consider that. I specifically used Deco Art Textile Paint Racing Red Rouge Course. It's a 2 fluid ounce, 59 milliliter. I used a lot less paint than I thought I would use. This was actually clearanced, so it maybe is a bit older than they prefer. Originally $3.99. It was $2 on clearance, and it worked fine. I didn't have any issues with the paint. The number on it for the Deco Art is DTFP104. Pretty nice paint. Had no issues. It didn't smell weird or anything, and I was in a closed room. Probably not the smartest thing, but I didn't use a ton of paint, so it was fine. For the brush that I used, It was a number 6 Artist Loft Tribeca Bright Brilliant. Basically one of the cheapest brushes I could find. Honestly, this brush was too big for a lot of the detail work I would have liked to have done. It was okay, but I would suggest buying 2 brushes, one of this size to do the larger portions, and one maybe half the size of this to do detail work with a finer tip to it. It may be shorter bristles so they don't move as much when you're painting. But it was serviceable. I got the job done, just not as well as I would have preferred. You can see the process. I took 2 red solo cups, cut them down to size, one for water, one for paint. I didn't really use the water much, just to clean the brush a little bit after long sessions of painting so that the brush didn't have a ton of old material on it. But basically I didn't use the water too much. And with the paint, you're going to use a lot less than you probably would think. So don't put a ton of paint into your cup because it's going to dry out as you go through the process, because it takes a long time. In this case, with so many little pieces of text and such to deal with, yeah, it takes time. I use a chopstick to hold down the template as I'm painting, so my fingers are too big. The chopstick is much smaller and fine, and it actually works really well to hold down the template to the material so you don't get as much overspill on the broadcloth that I'm painting in this case, because I want the template to prevent that from happening. And the template needs to be as close as possible to the fabric to prevent paint from getting under it. You're going to have to position yourself and reposition yourself so that you can have as clean edges as possible doing hand painting like this. Even with a template, you have to be very careful, and I didn't do an amazing job, honestly, but got the job done, I guess. So a lot of time-consuming detail work, but Bob Ross was hanging out with me in spirit, and I enjoyed it. It was pretty fun. First time doing this type of painting, probably. I'd have to think back to my other cosplays. I've probably done some painting here and there, but not like this, as far as I can remember. It was fun. It worked out decently well. And the template, I think, was a massive help, definitely. But yeah. So once I was finished over everything there, I had to deal with all of the parts that were covering areas that needed red paint. So I took off the template, and by hand, I covered those up with additional paint. Now, I could have left it because it looks close enough, but it definitely, finishing it off looks a lot better in my opinion. So it's as close as possible to the original design. So now I have the completed design. Pretty happy with it. Up close, it doesn't look amazing. The lines aren't perfectly straight. There's some wonkiness to it, but I'm happy with it. Adding this black and white little logo to the hooded sweatshirt was pretty easy. I just had some black fabric, some white fabric, and I used some interfacing inside of it to give it structure. I sewed the black and the white together, put the interfacing inside, sewed it around the edges there, and then attached it to the hooded sweatshirt. Pretty simple. And on the back portion, I made a black strap that was kind of stretchy and just looped it around the back. So that's an actual strap in the back that I could hook something to if I wanted to, but not too difficult. With the pants, I did add cinching to the ankle cuffs. The pants that I had was from a previous cosplay. Clan had the dad in his photographer mode. Can't remember. He's like DJ Akio or something. I used those pants, and then I just cinched the bottom things because they were straight types. And thankfully, with these ones, they're Amazon Basics branded. I was able to just cut an interior slit on each side and then take this elastic that was thin and just push it through the entire cuff, bottom cuff, ankle cuff, whatever it's called, and tie them off, basically wrap them on each end so that hopefully they won't get pulled into the pants. I'm going to fix those up in the future and just make them more larger so they won't go through. But yeah, that worked just fine. And in this case, I would have liked to have added pockets, but I didn't have any fabric that was similar to this fleece material. And I really tried to find some type of pants that would match, at a retail store. And I couldn't find anything of a similar color as the Spider-Man ones, which is weird. You would think the bright blue would be pretty easy to find in men's pants, but it's not, at least not now. I made a strap for the bag that goes along with this design. In this case, I made one large piece of green broadcloth that I had purchased. I sewed one edge, reversed it, and then capped off the ends, sewed all the way around the final product. And then I had a pretty solid piece of green fabric in a long rectangle. And I was trying to think of how to attach it to the bag. I ended up using a bunch of elastic, black elastic, 2 straps of long elastic to wrap around the bag in different areas so that I could really affix it to the bag in the position that I wanted. And that worked well. That worked great. Of course, this is Bagman, so I had an old Menards bag that I found, and I cut that to size, used a gold Sharpie to add some texture, help me figure out where the eyes would position. I measured the top of, like, kind of the top of my head to where my eyes were, around 5 inches as far as I can tell. So I measured kind of where the eyes would be, cut them out, and it worked okay. So that was fine. And I cut off the bottom portion and added the spikes to it to make it look more similar to the actual design. And then I used the Sharpie again to just like give it more look and texture a little bit, just so it doesn't look perfectly uniform. With the web shooters, I just used this really large elastic that I had, which looked pretty close to the things I wrapped it around. I had some loops that are for belts and such. I took off the center pin from those, and I just used those to like cinch down the elastic material in 2 portions, one for where the center of the hand is, and then also where the web shooter canister is. And I used a bunch of masking tape. I used a serial ATA cable with that to push into the Polaroid Go film containers. Yeah, it's not anything special. I just did a really quick job on those web shooters to make them look kind of similar, where the serial ATA cable comes out of it and it looks like it's the thing that would shoot out the web material. And finally, I did a little photo shoot. I don't have a ton of space, so I've got this weird thing. It's covering a closet and just a wall with this gray, I don't know, what is this called, for windows. So I've had that there for a long time, and it's decent enough. It's just a uniform background, not perfect. I need to try to steam again so it looks not as goofy, but whatever. Anyways, that was my backdrop. You'd think a person that does photography you'd think I would have done a better job on the photos, but it's just such a process. Photographing yourself is difficult. I set up a camera, in this case the Nikon Z5, using the phone app to control the camera. Nikon, however you want to pronounce it. Their app is okay, somewhat functional, but it has some weird quirks. For example, you can't set the white balance through the app. It prevents you from using a custom white balance, which is so odd to me. I don't get it. And that kind of messes up the photos a little bit. I would like to set the white balance to a very specific value. I have this panel light that does RGB, and that's basically attached to the table. I turned that on for a little splash of color in the background, in this case a purple. I just left it at. And I have this large studio light with a softbox as the main key light. So that's all I had for the lighting besides an ambient light in the background. Yeah, so just 2 lights, good enough type of situation. I was getting ready, adding all of the stuff that I need to wear, and just going through the process, putting the bag on and whatever, doing my thing. Yeah, so the photos aren't anything special. It would be cool, obviously to go on location somewhere and take photos in the city or something, which I could do, but I don't have a huge desire to do that, honestly. But yeah, nice, fun project. About 4 days in total through it, and I enjoyed it. If you have any questions or anything, feel free to post a comment on this video. I don't check this account too often, but hopefully at some point I'll see your comment and be able to respond. Yeah, hope you enjoyed the video. Scott of Cosplay Bonsai. Thanks.